A low not seen since the global financial crisis. South Korea's economy grows by just 2% in 2019. We have the details. An international public health emergency. The WHO will make that determination soon about a new coronavirus in China that's spreading fast, both inside and outside China. Plus, history on Capitol Hill. The impeachment trial of President Trump kicks off in the Senate. The two sides are currently debating the trial rules. So let's start with the big domestic economic news that's been coming in over the past couple of hours. It's just been revealed by the nation's central bank that the South Korean economy grew by 2% last year. Now, that is on par with the Bank of Korea's forecast made back in November, but is the slowest pace in a decade when the world was in the midst of the global financial crisis. A bright spot is that the local economy grew by 1.2% on quarter in the October to December period. That's the fastest pace since the third quarter of 2017. However, it must be said that that was boosted mainly by government spending. Both construction and facilities investment increased in the fourth quarter, but exports edged down. Now, China is desperately trying to keep a lid on the spread of the Wuhan coronavirus, but so far it seems to be a losing battle and could get even worse with the Lunar New Year holiday about to start in just a matter of days. More than 300 people in China have been confirmed to have been struck down by the virus so far. 6 have died. What makes matters all the more concerning is that we now have confirmation that the infection can pass from human to human. Seung-jae with the details.
The outbreak of the so-called Wuhan coronavirus has now killed 6 people and left more than 3 people sick in China, as health officials there scramble for ways to prevent the virus spreading even further. The coronavirus, which causes a form of pneumonia, is thought to have originated in late December at a wholesale seafood market in the city of Wuhan. Health officials first believed the virus could only be spread through animals, but the World Health Organization now says it can be spread between humans after 15 medical staff became infected. Officials say human-to-human infection is possible through close contact, and they are advising people to avoid close contact with anyone with cold or flu-like symptoms. With the outbreak, Wuhan has announced a series of new measures, including the cancellation of upcoming Lunar New Year celebrations, which had been expected to attract hundreds of thousands of people. Travel agencies have also been ordered to ban group tours in and out of Wuhan, and the number of thermal monitors and screening areas in public spaces will be increased. The latest measures come as Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered resolute efforts to curb the spread of the virus. Beyond China, the outbreak has spread to South Korea, Thailand, Taiwan, and Japan. In another first on Tuesday, a person in the U.S. was confirmed to have the virus. A man in Washington state first experienced symptoms after returning from a trip to a region near Wuhan. He was hospitalized last week with pneumonia, but was later confirmed to have the Wuhan coronavirus. North Korea is also stepping up its preventive measures, as it has banned Chinese tourists from entering the country. With the world on high alert, the WHO will meet on Wednesday to decide whether to declare the outbreak an international public health emergency. Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, as you'd imagine, this new virus also has South Korea on high alert, especially given the country's proximity geographically to China. Fortunately, 3 patients here in South Korea who showed symptoms of the coronavirus were found on Tuesday to have tested negative. However, a Chinese woman who was confirmed with the virus She is South Korea's first and only case thus far confirmed. She's in a stable condition at a hospital in Incheon. She is under isolation. For more on the efforts being made by local authorities here in South Korea to contain the virus and the necessary precautions you need to know to make sure you stay as safe as possible, Kim Bok-young reports.
A 35-year-old Chinese woman who flew in from Wuhan and was confirmed to have pneumonia from the Wuhan coronavirus is reportedly in stable conditions. According to the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, she had been diagnosed with a cold in a hospital in Wuhan before she came to South Korea, but has since recovered with most pneumonia symptoms gone. However, the Chinese patient is yet to be discharged from hospital as she is still under observation. Also on Tuesday, 3 people that were held in quarantine after showing pneumonia-like symptoms have been released after testing negative for the Wuhan coronavirus. An expert says that although the fatality rate is comparatively lower than other viruses that have hit South Korea in the past, people need to go to hospital if they have certain symptoms because the virus is contagious.
One of the things that we see to decide whether this virus could be spread among people is whether there is the infected among the medical team or not. It is reported that 15 Chinese medical members were infected, so it is certainly a virus that spreads. Like other coronavirus such as SARS or MERS, it seems it is spread by the droplets that come out when people cough or hands that have this on.
Since the first confirmed patient was moved straight from the airport to the hospital, the expert says it is unlikely that there will be lots of patients right away. Yet, he says it is possible for the virus to spread as there is lots of interaction between South Korea and China. Thus, experts say to go to the hospital if you are showing certain symptoms.
When people have a fever, chill, and respiratory symptoms such as coughing or have problems with breathing, they need to go to hospital. Since it has not spread across South Korea, if someone with respiratory problems and fever has been in Wuhan or had contact with a confirmed patient in the last 2 weeks, they need to go to hospital.
To prevent the spread of the virus, people should wash their hands regularly and cover their mouth when coughing. Kim Bok-young, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, North Korea is stepping up its rhetoric against the United States. The North now says it may seek a new path after Washington imposed fresh sanctions on North Korean companies amid their stalled nuclear talks. Pyongyang also says it no longer has any reason to be bound by its commitments to stop testing nuclear bombs and ICBMs. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
We have already warned that if the United States misjudges our patience, tries to enforce unilateral demand upon us, and persists in imposing sanctions and pressure against my country, we may be compelled to seek a new path for defending our sovereignty and supreme national interests.
During a UN disarmament conference in Geneva on Tuesday, North Korea's representative Ju Yong-chul said Pyongyang's efforts to mend ties with Washington have been met with hostility. He added that the U.S. claims it wants to resume dialogue, but it has no intention to drop its hostile policies toward the regime.
As it became clear now that the U.S. remains unchanged in its ambition to block the development of the DPRK and stifle its political system, we found no reason to be unilaterally bound any longer by the commitment that the other party fails to honor.
The North Korean official did not elaborate on which specific commitments he was referring to, but the U.S. disarmament ambassador called the comments quite concerning.
I'm not sure what the DPRK representative meant by no longer feeling that it's bound by its commitment. It didn't elaborate on it, but my hope is that they're not talking about moving away from that agreement that was reached between President Trump and Chairman Kim in 2018.
The U.S. official said Washington is trying to get Pyongyang back to the negotiating table as it's, quote, in the best interest of North Korea, the region, and the global community. since the Hanoi summit between Kim Jong-un and President Trump ended abruptly without any meaningful results in February 2019, denuclearization talks between the two sides have been left in limbo. Kang-yong, Arirang News.
South Korea will dispatch troops and Navy vessels to the Strait of Hormuz near Iran to protect South Korean nationals and commercial ships passing through what is a vital oil transit route. But it will not be sending them as part of the US-led coalition, instead operating independently to avoid creating any unnecessary friction with Tehran. Kim Jeon reports.
An official from Seoul's defense ministry said on Tuesday that South Korea's Cheonghae Unit, currently on anti-piracy missions in waters off Somalia, is to expand its operating area to the Gulf of Oman and Arabian or Persian Gulf, including the Strait of Hormuz, for an unspecified period of time due to rising tensions in the Middle East. 2 liaison officers will be sent to the Bahrain-based International Maritime Security Construct, the coalition of countries tasked with maintaining security in the region, to make preparations and intel gathering for the unit's 6-month mission. The 31st rotation of the Cheonghae Unit began on Tuesday with the 4,400-ton Wangon destroyer, complete with 300 military personnel and a Lynx helicopter, replacing the 30th rotation's Kangamchan destroyer. The Defense Ministry official said increasing the unit's personnel or equipment would require parliamentary approval, but that expanding its operating area did not require such approval. Due to the limited capacity of the unit, Seoul may ask the IMSC for help depending on the situation, but in principle, the official stressed the unit's role is to protect Korean nationals and vessels. The official said the government has been mulling over the military's role in the Strait of Hormuz since last May, due to the region's significance in crude oil supply.
South Korea's oil tankers, which carry more than 70% of Korea's crude oil imports, pass through the Strait of Hormuz some 900 times a year. Also, some 25,000 South Korean nationals reside in the Middle East.
The Defense Ministry officials said the Foreign Ministry has informed its Iranian counterpart of the decision, while Washington is said to have welcomed the move. Some South Korean media outlets have raised the possibility that the move could help Seoul in its negotiations with Washington on other issues, including the defense cost-sharing talks, which were held last week without a compromise. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, the United States has welcomed South Korea's decision to send troops to the Strait of Hormuz to protect its citizens and ships passing through that vital waterway. A Pentagon spokesperson said on Tuesday that Washington welcomes its allies helping to safeguard freedom of navigation in the Middle East by supporting the US-led international maritime security construct. This spokesperson said the situation in that part of the world is an international problem that requires an international solution. Seoul's foreign ministry said Iran has expressed concern over South Korea's deployment to the region. Now, only one story to start our international news today, and yes, you guessed it. It's the start of the impeachment trial of President Trump in the US Senate, a historic moment indeed. The two sides have been making their opening arguments and debating the trial rules, and it could go late into the night over there. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Yoon Jung-min. Jung-min, we hear there have been some changes to the trial rules.
Well, that's right, Mark. The impeachment process began in the Senate Tuesday, and debates are underway on Capitol Hill to set the trial rules. Two major changes to the rules were made at last minute. The new resolution will give each side, the House managers and the Trump's legal team, 3 days each to make their 24 hours of trial arguments instead of the 2 days as earlier proposed. Also, they've decided to admit the House's evidence automatically unless the president's team puts forward a motion to reject the evidence. However, there is still disagreement about calling additional witnesses. Take a look at what the House impeachment managers and the president's legal team have been saying so far.
The trial should be fair to the House, which has been wrongly deprived of evidence by a president who wishes to conceal it. It should be fair to the president, who will not benefit from an acquittal or dismissal if the trial is not viewed as fair.
A partisan impeachment is like stealing an election. And that's exactly what we have. We have, talk about the framers' worst nightmare. It's a partisan impeachment that they've delivered to your doorstep in an election year.
For sure, we'll have to see how the debate unfolds throughout the week, but it's sure to be a heated one. President Trump was impeached in the House in December for allegedly asking Ukraine's then newly elected president to investigate his political rivals ahead of the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam says Chinese President Xi Jinping has assured her that Beijing will not tighten controls on the city despite the month-long mass protests taking place there. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Tuesday, Lam said President Xi has offered personal assurances that he would not use the protests as an excuse to tighten China's controls on Hong Kong. She added the Chinese government has made it clear to her that China wants Hong Kong to succeed under the one country, two systems policy and have a high degree of autonomy. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says a Phase 2 trade deal with China will not necessarily be a, quote, big bang that removes all existing tariffs. During an appearance at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Tuesday, he said some tariffs could come off. When it comes to a digital tax on American companies in Europe, Mnuchin warned that Italy and Britain will face U.S. tariffs if they proceed with the tax plan. Also at the forum, Chinese Vice Premier Han Zhong said the underlying trend of China's economy remained unchanged, adding that Beijing is opening its door wider to the world. He defended globalization and criticized protectionism by some countries.
Now, South Korea's trade figures for January so far are out, and they signal that the country's chip exports may be moving toward their first monthly gain in over a year. Now, this is a refreshing change, should it hold anyway, after a 2019 to forget for the industry, which is one of the main drivers, if not the main driver, of the South Korean economy. Kim Da-mi reports.
After months of sluggish growth, the country's semiconductor exports returned to positive territory in January. The Korea Customs Service said Friday that semiconductor exports were 8.7% higher during the first 20 days of January than they were a year earlier. The rebound comes after 13 consecutive months of decline, including an almost negative 17% growth last month. The country's 20-day trade report is an early indicator of global demand. Although it's too early to interpret much from Tuesday's data, an official from the country's trade ministry attributed the rebound to the rising DRAM spot price, evaluating the latest figures as a positive sign for the new year. Exports of petroleum products also rose over 19% from a year earlier. However, the country's export figures in general were not so bright. Overall exports dropped 0.2% during the 20-day period, although that is the smallest decline in more than a year. Automobile exports were down almost 7%, and chip exports were down over 40% respectively. By country, exports to South Korea's biggest trading partner, China, dropped 4.7%, while those to Vietnam and Hong Kong went up. Korea's imports came to $28 billion, up 3% from a year before, leaving a $2.4 billion trade deficit. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Now, some very happy people today because Samsung Electronics has promoted over 150 executives in a mass reshuffle of the tech giant's top brass. Among them are 9 foreign and some female employees, signs that Samsung is aiming to diversify its corporate leadership and focus on grooming and bringing through young talent. Kim Jae-hee has this report.
Samsung Electronics promoted 4 foreign executives and 5 women out of its 162 senior promotions on Tuesday. The company said it tried to keep promoting foreign workers and women as a way to reinforce diversity. It said it has also promoted young leaders who have shown strong performance and high growth potential to executive vice president positions in order to expand the pool of future chief executives. Among those young executives promoted this year was Pranav Mistry, the 38-year-old head of think tank team at Samsung Research America and CEO of Samsung Star Labs. Mistry is known as the creator of the so-called Neon project, which created human-like digital avatars that were showcased at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas earlier this month. Another young foreign executive, Matteo Apotheker from the management support team, was also among those promoted. 5 women earned promotion this year, including An Soo-jin in the semiconductor business. An was recognized for her expertise in developing VNAND devices. However, the 9 foreign or female executives promoted this year is actually slightly lower than the 11 foreign or female executives promoted in each of the past 2 annual reshuffles. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Now let's continue our artificial intelligence series of reports that we've been running this week. And it's fair to say that human feelings are often hard to describe or quantify, as of course they are a subjective state of being. But with AI continuing to evolve at an ever rapid pace, scientists are working on state-of-the-art treatments that they say could potentially improve our emotional well-being. Oh Seong has this report.
Human emotions can be difficult to read, but this artificial intelligence program analyzes facial expressions to provide a snapshot of a person's mental well-being. Multisense detects various facial and vocal attributes, including eye gaze, eyebrow movement, and intonation, using computer vision, language processing, and other algorithms. Through a 5 to 10 minute interview with a doctor or a virtual human, the program can provide insights to help doctors diagnose their patients.
We reached this initial stage, which was we wanted to know, is it possible? Do we see behavior markers? Can computer quantify? And the good news is we've seen many of them. We have now the exact count, I forgot exactly, but about 25 of these behavior markers for depression, for anxiety, for PTSD, and even for suicidal ideation and for psychosis.
Using AI to detect and analyze human emotions is a niche field called affective computing that's expected to grow into a $40 billion market by 2022, growing at an average pace of 43% a year. The possibilities range from mood tracking apps and mental wellness chatbots to learning tools for children with autism to help them develop emotional intelligence. BrainNeat Technologies, for instance, helps children with autism or ADHD to improve their concentration through computer games. Eye gaze detectors determine the level of focus.
So being able to pay attention to things in their periphery and shift attention appropriately, that's about a 35% improvement. And in inhibitory control, there was actually a 65% improvement. And that's the skill that's going to allow them to stay focused on whatever they're working on without getting easily distracted by other things going on around them.
Adding AI to the equation would help customize attention-enhancing activities for each individual, allowing meaningful progress. Wearable devices powered by AI are also providing something of a sixth sense. A smart wristband developed by an MIT spin-off helps users regulate their mood by adjusting their body temperature.
We create different waveforms, so those are the algorithms dictating reading temperature from your skin and the differential from that, and how much we should deliver in terms of those on-off sensations to maintain that perception of cooling or warming.
As AI continues to evolve, not only in terms of simple intelligence, but also human sensibilities, it could help us become smarter and more mindful of our emotional well-being. Oh Seong, Arirang News, Pittsburgh.
Good morning. Those of you in the south, including Jeju Island, will need an umbrella on your way out. Rain will gradually spread, and the further south you are, the more precipitation you will see, 10 to 40 millimeters for Jeju Island and the southern coastal regions, 5 to 20 for the rest of the south into tomorrow. Temperatures will stay mild for this time of year under plenty of clouds today. Tomorrow will be even milder than today with double-digit afternoon highs in store for here in the capital. And daily highs this afternoon will be 2 to 4 degrees higher than yesterday in most parts of the country. And the unseasonably mild trend is forecast to continue into Lunar New Year holiday with highs nearing 10 degrees Celsius in Seoul. But there will be frequent showers across the country, so be sure to drive safely. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for views around the world.
Well, that's where we're going to have to leave the news and weather for now. Our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.
Duksum Island straddles both Seongdong-gu